Hi everyone, it's Maria from Sew Jewish. Thanks for joining me. Today we are sewing fleece appliques onto a cuddle blanket to make this Aleph-Bet cuddle blanket. Now I think everyone loves a good cuddle blanket. It's soft and warm and really comforting. And I think it's especially nice as you head into the cold weather as we are now in New York. And I also wanted to do this tutorial now because we're headed into the holiday gift season. And I think a cuddle blanket like this makes a really great gift for a baby or a toddler or their parents who need one for their baby. This is the second tutorial from the Sew Jewish book. And if you missed my last tutorial, the Sew Jewish book is a collection of 18 projects, most of them with printable patterns, for all the key things you'd want for Jewish sewing. There's a challah cover and a matzah cover and a chuppah and a kippah, and also this cuddle blanket, because I think any collection of key Jewish sewing projects has to include something that features the Aleph-Bet, and it has to have something for the little ones. So that is this project. And I will put a link in the description section for where you can get that book, the Sew Jewish book. It's available in PDF form for immediate download. It's on Etsy and Craftsy and also the Sew Jewish shop. So you can find that link in the description section. All right, let's get started on this tutorial. I've already done the first part of this project, which is making the blanket from some fleece. I started with some nice double-faced fleece, and for this you want something where the pile isn't more than 3 millimeters. The pile, of course, is this the fibers that stick up. Anything more than that, and your appliques, you'll have trouble making your appliques neat on there. I've cut it into a rectangle, 30 inches by 40 inches, which is a nice size for a blanket that could go onto a crib. And I have put satin blanket binding around the outside. Then I printed out a copy of the applique pattern from the Sew Jewish book. Here is the Aleph and the Bet and the Gimel. And I put these patterns on some blue fleece and cut them out. And with the appliques all cut out, the next step is to pin them onto the blanket. Let me get this other one out of the way. Now I like the idea of putting the appliques in a corner of the blanket. Like here's one of the short sides. I like putting them here. You can put them anywhere, but I sort of picture a young baby or a toddler using this blanket and laying on it and just learning to push themselves up, and as they push themselves up they see these letters and they just become familiar with them. Or I see a toddler playing on this blanket and just seeing the letters. If they're in the middle of it, they'll see them in the right orientation this way. And what I'm thinking actually is I'm thinking about how this is going to look when it gets packed up for a gift. And I'm picturing this going into a gift box, like a shirt gift box, which is about this wide. If I do that in thirds, and then I'm going to do it in thirds again. Okay, here we go. And I'm going to place the appliques on here, like this. Here is my Aleph, and here is my Bet, and here's the Gimel. Let's play around with a little bit. Here we go. Now you can even use these patterns, the applique patterns, to make the letters to go onto a blanket that's store-bought. You don't even have to make your own blanket, and then you can just make them special by putting these appliques on them. Now, let's see. Is that about right? All right, I like that. Now pin them in place. with the appliques pinned in place, we can sew them onto the blanket. And let me show you what we're headed for, what the final effect is going to be. You see, we're going to sew zigzag stitches all around the edge of the applique, which is going to finish the edges of the applique and sew it to the blanket at the same time. Now I want to take a minute to point out a few things about machine applique finishing with fleece. First of all, if you've done a lot of applique, machine applique, you might have noticed that when I'm working with fleece, I didn't use any stabilizer. You don't need any stabilizer with this because these two fabrics together have enough bulk that the zigzag stitches aren't going to bunch up when you do the sewing. The next thing is, I want to point out that the pile of the fleece can affect where these stitches land. And if you want to keep them nice and neat, a nice neat look, I would recommend choosing a thread color that matches or nearly matches the applique. That way, when the stitches don't lie exactly where you want to, or the pile moves them around a bit, keeping the color the same will sort of obscure the fact that they're not landing exactly neatly. One more tip, now this would be for extra credit. The back of this project is going to show when the blanket is used. So you could use different color threads in the top and bottom of the machine. I'm going to do that today. I'm going to put blue thread in the top and yellow thread in the bobbin. You don't have to do that. Here is the blanket I made earlier, and you can see I used the same color thread on the top and the bottom. And the effect is fine. But if you've got the thread on hand and you want to do something a little extra special, you can use the two colors of threads. All right, let's get started sewing. One of the first So Jewish videos was a tutorial that was all about finishing machine appliques, and I'll put a link to that in the description section. You might want to take a look at that. And if you have the So Jewish book, you'll find in the section of basic techniques an explanation about how to finish machine appliques with diagrams, so you can refer to that. But I can show you the basics right now, and because it can be a little bit tough to see on the sewing machine and I want to make sure you see it, I'm going to explain it first with this paper diagram and a marker. Here is our diagram of the bit applique. You can see this is what we're headed for. This is slightly enlarged. All right, I'm going to start sewing this way. This is how I'm going to put it on the machine. We start by taking a few straight stitches backwards, and then we switch to zigzag and we start sewing. And I want you to notice that these zigzag stitches lie almost entirely on the applique. The stitches are not centered on the edge of the applique. As we zigzag back and forth, the right side, when the stitch gets to the right side, the needles should land ideally on the blanket right next to the edge of the applique. All right, and then we go forward. Here, as we're sewing, we're getting to a corner that turns to the left. The way we handle that kind of corner is, here we go, left, right, stop when you get right to this corner, right to the exact corner, with the needle on the right-hand side. Then, what we're going to do is, with the needle in the fabric, lift the presser foot, pivot the fabric in the machine, put the presser foot back down, and then continue sewing. And you'll see the stitches stay on the applique. We move a little bit further. Now we have a corner that turns to the right. The way we handle that, here we go, left, right, left. We're going to go past the corner and stop with the needle in the left-hand position. And this distance from the corner is about the width of the zigzag stitches. That way, when we pivot in the machine and begin sewing again, our stitches lie where they should. All right, so the two kinds of corners. Now we get to a curve. And the basic way to handle the curve is that you just stop every once in a while to adjust the direction. Stop and pivot. But the key to getting a nice smooth curve is to only pivot when you're on the outside of the stitch line. So here we're curving to the right, so you pivot on the left. This next curve goes in the opposite direction. Here we go, we're going left, right, left, right. Here you want to pivot only when you're on the right side of the stitches. It's on the outside of the curve, but this time it's on the right side of the stitches. So those are the 4 main situations. We've got a corner going to the left, a corner going to the right, and a curve in each direction. And you just continue in that same way. I want to show you one more thing before we start, and that is how to handle a sharp corner. You'll notice this corner turns to the left, but it's more acute than a right angle. Here's how to handle a sharp corner. Here we're moving forward, left, right, left, right. We're stopping here with the needle on the right hand side, right at the corner, and then we pivot. But notice here, if I line up my machine so that this line is facing toward me and I'm lined up with this line, and I start sewing my zigzag stitches, a couple of stitches are going to come off the edge of the applique. Now, in a lot of applique, you'll see a recommendation to shorten the stitches here. But when we're working with fleece, I want to, not to shorten them, to make them narrower to handle the corner. But with fleece, I like to keep the stitches wide so that they go up over the pile. So instead of changing the stitch width, what I do is, when I turn the corner, I keep the machine so that I can take a couple of stitches perpendicular to this line, and the stitches will stay on the applique. Then I pivot so that I'm oriented to this line and I go forward. And that makes a nice, neat, sharp corner. Now, when I first started learning how to do machine appliques, I used to make diagrams sort of like this before I even started as a reference, because it's easier sometimes to figure out on paper than it can be when you're actually sewing and you found you've moved past a point that you'd want to pivot. So I recommend that you may want to do that for yourself too. Print out a copy of the applique page and then go through and just mark your pivot points like this, just like we did when we were working slowly. On the outside of the curves, and here I've got a right turn, so I'm here, right turn here, I got a little bit of a curve here, I might just keep that fairly straight, and here, this corner, and this corner. And do the same thing on all of the appliques. And that way you've got a nice reference to work from as you're sewing. Can make the sewing a lot easier. Alright, now we get to the fun part. You'll notice that I've put in the presser foot that will allow me to do zigzags, and the needle can move left and right. Alright, let's get started. I'm going to do it just as I showed you on the diagram. First, let's get these pins out of the way. I'm starting here on the applique close to the edge. Take a couple of straight stitches backwards. Alright, now I'm switching to zigzag, and I'm going to use a stitch width of 3.5 and a stitch length of 1. Don't do less than 1 or you'll find that the fleece stretches out as you sew. And I am going to adjust the fabric a little bit to make, because I can see where the needle's going to land. And I want those stitches right along the edge as I showed you. Alright, this line has a slight curve in it, so I'm going to pivot. We're coming up on that first corner, which turns to the left, so we stop with the machine in the right hand side at the corner, with the needle in the fabric, lift up your presser foot, pivot, put the presser foot back down, and while you're at it, get this thread out of the way, and the bottom one too, so that doesn't get caught up. And now it just goes straight. My table is shaking a little bit, but I think you can still see okay. Alright, we're coming up on that corner that goes to the right. I'm going slightly past the corner, about a distance that's the width of the zigzag stitches. Sometimes you have to fudge that a little bit. Take out this pin which is in the way, and I move forward. And I'm going to have to adjust. Now the applique is starting to curve, so I'm going to stop occasionally and pivot. And since this curve is bending to the right, I'm pivoting while the needle is on the left. And always pivot when the needle is in the fabric. Just going to watch me move through this. Important to remove the pins as you go along so that you don't ruin your needle or your presser foot. See how every time I pivot, the needle is on the outside of the line of stitches. Alright, here's a fairly straight line, and we move forward again. Get this pin out of the way. We're coming up on this curve that bends to the right. So to negotiate this curve, I stop, the curve bends to the left. So to get around it, I stop when the needle is in the right. Okay, left and right. Needles on the right, on the outside of the line of stitches. And you just kind of have to judge when to stop and pivot. When the stitches start, moving too far off the edge of the applique or inside the applique, then you know to pivot. Okay, a turn to the left. I'm stopping at the corner. You knew this already now. You're a pro. Stop at the corner with the needle on the right hand side. Pivot. Press your foot back down, and I go. All right, you're pro at this now. I'm going to go ahead and finish this. I'm coming up on this last corner, this acute corner, so let me demonstrate that. I'm stopping. If you haven't already, when you get close to the beginning, trim these threads. Ideally, we would have trimmed them off earlier than this to make sure they didn't get worked up in the zigzag stitches. But definitely take them off at this point so they don't get in the way. All right, here I come up on the corner. Left-hand corner. Stop with the needle and then the right-hand side. Lift the presser foot. Pivot. And instead of lining this up to come exactly along this line, first I'm going to stop. First I'm going to have it in this direction. So take one stitch perpendicular to this line. Now I'm going to line it up with this line. Okay. Now I'm back where I started. To finish, switch back to a straight stitch. Adjust the position of the needle so that it's going to go down to the left of the stitches, and then take a couple stitches backwards. That's nice and neat. All right, here we go. Lovely. I'm going to trim. All right. I really like that effect. Fleece on fleece. It's just nice and fluffy. All right, so just finish the other appliques using the same technique. Wow, here we are. Last applique finished. Look at that. Oh, do you know what? That is really sweet and really soft and fun. And here's the back. That's going to make a really sweet gift. And check it out. During a break in making a tutorial, I pulled out a gift box to see how the blanket would look in it, since I had this thought about placing the appliques, especially so they would fit in the gift box. So I fold it again in thirds. Let's see how neatly I can do this quickly. And in thirds again. In thirds again. And it turns out it fits nearly perfectly in this gift box. I'm better at sewing than I am at wrapping, but look at that. I know just who I'm giving this to, and I'm kind of excited about it now. Now, if you know someone who could use a nice cuddly Aleph-Bet blanket like this, get your copy of So Jewish today. Follow the links in the description section, or go to sojewish.com/SoJewishBook. That's sojewish.com/SoJewishBook. And if you want to make sure you don't miss any of my future tutorials, I invite you to subscribe to the So Jewish YouTube channel. Thanks for being with me for this tutorial this week. I'll see you next time.